Hey folks, before we get started, we would like to dedicate this episode to the memory of Bruno Almeida. He was a sommelier, he was a drummer, he was the drummelier. He was a champion of Portuguese wines, and he will be greatly missed by the wine community worldwide. There is a GoFundMe page. Please check it out. It benefits his son. If you just Google Bruno Almeida Memorial Fundraiser, GoFundMe, you will find that page. His last name is spelled Almeida. So cheers to Bruno.
So I can be a bit of a Luddite when it comes to new technologies. So I was drawn to an article from ZDNet about a robot sommelier at Marie Concetto Winery's Calistoga tasting room.
Oh yeah, I was just reading Eric Asimov's piece in the New York Times about the twilight of the American sommelier. Don't tell me, Nick, are they going to be replaced by robots?
Maybe eventually, but not quite. This robot som is just more of an arm that pours wine and can dance. If you've ever seen those like commercials where they show cars being assembled and those big arms, it's kind of one of those. But as the author of the article quickly found out, it can also pour a considerable amount of wine directly into your lap if it gets confusing.
Oh no.
Oh no. Oh, I almost feel kind of bad for it. Poor little robot.
I honestly don't feel bad for this little guy because at the end of the tasting, which costs an extra $20 just to engage with the robot called Robino Vino, he still held up a little wine glass with a little tips are appreciated sign on it. And the author tipped. I don't know if I would have.
This is a whole new argument to end tipping. Mystery subpoenas hit some of the Napa Valley's biggest names. Someone claims to have tapped into the Zillennial Zeitgeist. British Columbia has been frozen out, and Rioja is sounding a bit more charming. This is the Four Top, and these are the four wine stories we're following this week. I'm Catherine Cole, joined by Ruby Wolkovich and Nick Toole.
All right, guys. So our first story of the week is a bit of a mystery.
Yeah, we're going to have to check back in on this one, but here's the gist. According to Esther Mobley and Jess Lander of the San Francisco Chronicle, the FBI and federal prosecutors have issued a number of subpoenas to Napa County seeking documents related to some big-time players in the Napa Valley wine industry.
Yeah, well, so before we go any further, I have to put on my wary journalist hat and say, just because a person or a business is named in a subpoena does not necessarily mean they have broken the law. Just want to put that out there.
Very true. So the prosecutors and FBI want all correspondence between a number of businesses and Napa County since 2016, and they include Camus Vineyards, Hall Wines, Dariush Winery, Alpha Omega Winery, and more. It's unclear right now why these wineries and their owners are named, but of the 40 entities listed on the subpoena, at least 26 of them have made campaign donations to a county supervisor by the name of Alfredo Pedroza.
Folks in the Napa wine world will know that name because for a while he was a rising political star. That was until he got wrapped up in a scandal involving a winery development project that never came to be.
So much intrigue in the wine world. It's always just like one miniseries after another. So let's get into this backstory, shall we? For many years, the owners of Hall Wines, Craig and Catherine Hall, had tried to develop a ranch into a vineyard, but they had been thwarted over and over by environmental groups. Then in 2021, they were granted approval by the county, and this Alfredo Pedroza was one of the yes votes, but he had failed to disclose that his father-in-law had recently bought land adjacent to the Hall's proposed project. So obviously, when this came out, it was seen as a clear conflict of interest, and the county rescinded their approval for the project.
Yeah, it looked way too fishy that Pedroza helped greenlight a project that would have had an immediate financial impact on his father-in-law's newly acquired land. So it didn't take long for local residents to sniff that one out.
Well, the Halls have since sold the land to a group that is going to preserve it, but it seems like the feds are still interested in something. It's too soon to say if all of this is related to the Hall's failed project, but people are starting to connect some dots. Okay, I have a new segment for the podcast. I'm calling it Zillennial Zeitgeist. Nick, cue the music. This segment highlights the drinking habits or lack thereof of younger drinkers like moi. So, for our second news story today, we turn to a Financial Times article by Hannah Crosby, boldly titled, What Young Drinkers Want.
Oh my, if someone has cracked that code, I would really love to know what they know.
Well, I don't think Crosby is claiming to know it all, but she does have some good insights to share, at least as it pertains to the UK. She gets the obvious things out of the way early on in her piece, like younger drinkers are more aware of health effects and are less interested in binge drinking than yesteryear's young folks, but we've discussed that here previously. But one insight from this piece that was new to me is that Gen Z and millennials in the UK, at least, make up 34% of total spending on premise sales and 50% of off premise sales, despite the fact that they only make up 26% of wine drinkers. So do the math. What does that tell us?
They're down to blow some cash. It looks like UK young folks are willing to spend more even if they're drinking less. One London wine shop owner credits the pandemic. Folks had less to spend money on, but more time to spend it, so they are more content to spend £25 instead of 10 on a bottle, and they never looked back.
Yeah, another wine buyer cited in the article also notes something that I believe the two of you brought up a little while back on the foretop. Young drinkers want traceability. They want to know who made their wine and what went into it. We're seeing this when it comes to wine labeling trends, and we're finding that young consumers, are willing to pay more for wine that has a backstory. Some folks quoted in this article contend that younger generations are wary of wine's race to the bottom in terms of price, and they don't trust the quality of cheaper wines.
Yeah, that story and traceability argument rings true, at least for our listeners who responded to a recent question we posted on Instagram about this. I think another factor for young folks is finding wines that aren't, gate kept by wine snobs and that have that story and traceability aspect.
Yeah, I don't know. I have some unpopular opinions that probably will upset many people that listen to this podcast. But like the truth is, when I'm buying wine, I'm looking for a cool label.
Visuals matter.
Yeah, they really do.
Well, in this week's edition of Catastrophic Crop Loss, a prolonged January frost has definitively ruined almost 100% of the Okanagan's grape crop. For those of you who don't know, the Okanagan is a British Columbian wine growing region, and it's looking to eke out just 1 to 3% of its typical crop yield.
Oh, this is so sad. It looks like a pretty mild December was followed by January temperatures that dropped below negative 20 degrees Celsius or negative 4 degrees Fahrenheit, which severely damaged the vines. And no amount of pruning in February is going to pull them out of this.
Yeah, Catherine, I had never heard of this region, but I was looking at photos earlier and it's just absolutely gorgeous. This is truly a loss for Canadian wine, and the financial cost is likely to approach 260 million US dollars and up to 335 million if you account for the downstream economic effects.
Yikes. Yeah, extreme weather is taking more and more of a toll on wine production worldwide. Just a couple of weeks ago, we reported on catastrophic losses in Abruzzo due to excessive rain. And obviously, British Columbia is no stranger to freezing temps, but a crop loss of nearly 100% is unprecedented.
Yeah, I mean, they do make delicious ice wine out of British Columbia, but that is something that is intentional, and this was definitely not anticipated. And sadly, British Columbia saw huge losses of up to 58% following a freeze just back in December 2022, so just over a year ago.
Yeah, well, we can do our part by snapping up some Canadian wine when we get the chance. Try some BC wine, everyone, and support our compatriots to the north.
If you can find it.
Last week, we had bad news from Rioja. So this week, how about some good news, guys?
Yeah, I got some for you. According to the local news source Nueve Cuatrono, and thanks to Wine Searcher for flagging this story, there is a new appellation in town, Vinos de Pueblo. And Rioja is embracing a nomenclature that's similar to the village classification of France.
Hold on, slow down. Appellation, nomenclature, village. What's going on here?
All right. I'm the resident Cicerone, so I'll jump in here. I do know that the laws about printing regional or place names on wine labels are pretty strict, as I'm sure most of our listeners are aware. It's not actually something they really do in here, but I wish that they did. That would be cool. But for geographical names to appear on a wine label, it typically has to be approved by some sort of national governmental power. So here in the US, obviously that's the TTB. So it's changing over in Rioja.
Well, it's super subtle, but this is so I think when we were looking at news stories together, you all didn't understand why I was excited about this one. Um, but it's all about it's all about the connotations. So the existing appellation in Rioja for a wine that's sourced from a particular town is Vinos de Municipio. When you see that word municipal, what do you guys think?
It's the driest word in the English language, and I picture dry things like concrete and poorly maintained rec centers.
Or like a court building or a town hall. I don't know.
Yeah, not very exciting. So that designation was actually adopted fairly recently, but Rioja is already making, I believe, a change for the better just in renaming this designation. I mean, I believe the laws are changing a bit as well, but to me, it's a huge improvement to call these wines Vinos de Pueblo. So, like, when you hear that term Pueblo, what do you guys think of?
That sounds pretty nice. Sounds pretty like cozy.
Yeah, I always envision like those red clay buildings.
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. I just love that word pueblo. It sounds charming, bucolic, adorable. And to me, this is really a story about how we communicate about wine. And I think for me, pueblo is going to be a little closer in people's minds to the designation they have in France, which is village, and that translates as village. How does that sound to you guys?
I'm into it. If it's a cute label,
Yeah.
that's all I care about,
Yeah,
apparently.
village is very cozy as well.
Yeah. And you know what? The labels really do well if they have windmills on them. Insider tip.
Yes.
So, hey, listeners, every week we post a question of the week from the current episode on Instagram. We'd love to see your comments. And so, Ruby, can you share our question of the week from this past week, and some of our listeners' thoughts?
Absolutely. I got a kick out of this week's. I think we thought it was a bit of an edgy question, but it turns out we're just really lame. So we asked, are people dropping wine and embracing psychedelics? And one user, Antrim24, said, of course.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, the Disgorgeous podcast account just commented with a bunch of the sideways looking eye emojis, which I took to mean like we're not the only ones, right, guys?
yeah. And our friend Zach Jabal, hey, Zach, suggested a witty turn of phrase, dropping wine and dropping acid. Thanks, everyone. And I think Ruby and I need to get with the times. Apparently, Nick is with the times.
That's all we'll say.
We're, we're dorks. I stand by my drug, which is sparkling wine. So it's time for our dessert course. And my dessert this week is where I get my American pop culture news from. Well, just guess where I get it from, guys.
I get mine from Saint Hoax on Instagram, but I don't know where you get yours.
National Enquirer.
Okay, so I am going to sound like a huge dork, but I have lately been getting all my American pop culture news from Le Figaro, like as in the French newspaper.
Right, Catherine. I saw you posted a story about this before the Super Bowl. Le Figaro was reporting on our dumb American drinking games like they're some sort of exotic custom, which I guess they kind of are.
Yeah, we're kind of crazy. So this week, Le Figaro is telling us about Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre's new alcohol venture, which I couldn't find an article about this like anywhere else in the American media, but I found it in French media. And I am excited about this. It's called Gin and Juice. So yes, it is another cheesy canned cocktail, but I remember when that song came out 3 decades ago, and I do love gin, so I'm just going to give it a try. It's my dessert course. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm just, high five to Le Figaro, Snoop Dogg, and Dr. Dre. All right, this has been the Four Top Podcast. I am our executive producer, Catherine Cole.
I'm media and design manager, Ruby Welkovich.
I'm producer Nick Toole.
Keelan King is our sound supervisor and the composer and performer of our fantastic theme music. Please visit our website, thefourtop.org, to learn more about us, listen to back episodes, and subscribe to our newsletter.
If you have not already subscribed to The Four Top on iTunes or Spotify, please do so, and please leave us a rating.
Yeah, this is super important. Every rating helps feed the algorithm and helps new listeners find the foretop.
Well, from the Pueblo of Portland in Oregon's Willamette Valley, this is Catherine signing out.
Fresh off the ski slopes here in Maine, this is Nick signing out.
And it's nice and sunny here in Brooklyn. Stay safe out there, and thanks for listening.